Aunt Maris stood with her wine glass lifted. The chandelier caught her jewelry perfectly, like she'd positioned herself under the light on purpose. She smiled at Bianca first, long and warm, the smile she saved for things she was proud of. "One niece is a CEO," she announced to the table. Bianca sat a little straighter, uncomfortable but accepting the praise because refusing it was harder. Then Maris turned her eyes to me. Slow, deliberate, the pause designed to make people watch. "And the other," she said, voice sweet as poison, "is my charity case." The laugh that followed was sharp, automatic. The kind people produce when they're afraid of the alternative. My ears rang. I stared at my plate, fixed my eyes on it because if I looked up I would cry, and if I cried she would call me ungrateful. Maris tilted her head. "Don't look sad, sweetheart. We're all so proud of how far you've come." My throat tightened so hard swallowing hurt. I kept my face still, kept my hands flat against my thighs under the table so the trembling wouldn't show. Across the table, Bianca wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once. "My name is Kira Vale. I have been the family's before picture for as long as Maris has needed a spotlight to stand in." In the car afterward, I held everything together until Dane reached for my hand. Then it cracked. Not fully. Not in front of him. But enough. He asked what happened, and I heard myself say, it was just a joke. The lie tasted bitter the moment it left my mouth. My phone vibrated before we reached home. Maris had posted a photo of the dinner, everyone smiling, the table looking warm and beautiful. Her caption read, "So proud of my CEO niece, and my sweet girl who has been through so much, grateful to love them both." The comments filled immediately, people calling her generous, inspiring. A woman with such a big heart. I read each one with my stomach dropping lower. My pain was her halo. She had taken the worst parts of my life, the loss, the hard years, the things I never asked for, and dressed them up as evidence of her own goodness. She was wearing my story in public, and everyone was applauding her for it. I put my phone face down and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The next morning I went to work and tried to be a normal person, but every time my phone lit up, something in my chest braced like it was expecting another hit. In the break room, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. The careful smile, the tight eyes, my "don't make it worse" face. The one I'd been making my whole life. A memory surfaced without asking, 16 years old, newly motherless. Sitting on Maris's couch while she explained to visitors, we took her in, she had nowhere else to go. Like I was a stray she'd trained to sit still. That evening, Dane sat across from me at the kitchen table and said gently, "She isn't safe, Kira. She talks about you like you're a prop." "She's family," I said. The moment those words left my mouth, I hated them. Because they didn't feel like loyalty, they felt like surrender. They felt like the phrase I'd been handed years ago and told to repeat whenever something hurt. As if being blood-related canceled out everything else. I washed the dishes and quietly started wondering what it would take to stop pretending. At Sunday lunch, Bianca sat beside me with her posture perfect and her phone face down on the table, like she was trying not to take up any space for once. I leaned close. "Why didn't you say anything the other night?" She swallowed. Her jaw tightened slightly before she answered. "You don't understand how she gets when someone pushes back," she said. The words came out flat, practiced. Then she added, barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." I went very still. Bianca never apologized. Not to me, not to anyone as far as I'd witnessed. She'd been raised to move forward, not backward. But those two words sat between us like something fragile and important, like she was admitting something she didn't have the language for yet. Before I could respond, Maris's voice called from across the table. "Kira, come help me in the kitchen." Warm, light, commanding. The tone that didn't leave room for no. I looked at Bianca. She dropped her eyes to her plate. And I saw it clearly for the first time. She wasn't just uncomfortable, she was scared. Maris handed me a stack of plates the moment I entered the kitchen, like handing me work was as natural as breathing. "You were quiet last night," she said pleasantly, moving around the kitchen like she owned every inch of air. "Good." I kept my eyes on the plates. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. The public warmth disappeared. "People don't like drama, Kira. What they like is gratitude. Visible gratitude." My chest tightened. "I didn't do anything." She smiled, patient, like she was explaining something obvious to someone slow. "Exactly. Keep it that way. She reached out and patted my cheek. Light, gentle, the way you'd pat something that belonged to you. Then she walked out of the kitchen and back into the dining room, where her voice immediately lifted into warmth and laughter again. I stood there alone, holding plates, wearing a smile nobody was even there to see. My hands were shaking slightly, not from sadness this time, from something harder, something that had been sitting in the back of my chest for years, something that was slowly, finally deciding it was done waiting to have a name. Maris called 2 days later. Bright voice, perfect timing. I want you at the foundation gala, sweetheart. Just a small moment to speak. Your story inspires people so much. My pulse spiked. No, I said. Soft. Careful. Like asking permission to breathe. The line went quiet, long enough to be intentional. Then she laughed. Sweet, controlled. The laugh that had nothing warm inside it. Kira? She said my name like a correction. You don't get to say no. Not after everything I've done for you. The words landed like a hand closing slowly around my throat. When the call ended, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at the wall, thinking about that sentence. Not after everything I've done for you. I'd heard versions of it my whole life, every time I tried to have an opinion, every time I had a need that inconvenienced her timeline. She didn't hear my no as a boundary. She heard it as betrayal, as ingratitude, as evidence that after everything she'd invested, I was still failing to perform correctly. I needed to think carefully about what came next. A box arrived at my apartment 3 days later. Designer packaging. Tissue paper layered over something expensive. I opened it. A dress. Beautiful, fitted, clearly chosen to look a specific way on a specific stage. The note resting on top was written in Maris's handwriting. Wear this. Don't embarrass me. I sat down on the floor, held the note in both hands. Read it twice. Something about holding it made it real in a way the phone calls and the dinner comments hadn't quite been. Physical, undeniable, evidence with weight. Dane appeared in the doorway. Send it back. I didn't. I took out my phone and photographed the note, front and back. Then photographed the dress inside the box with the note visible beside it. Something in me, quiet, bruised, waking up slowly, understood what I was doing. I was collecting proof. Not because I knew what I was going to do with it yet. Because I was done living inside Maris's version of events without any record of what was actually true. The note was real. I needed it to stay real somewhere she couldn't reach. My manager called me into his office the following week. He was polite in a careful way that made my stomach immediately drop. He sat forward slightly. Someone reached out to me recently, expressed some concern. Concern about what? My voice stayed level. My hands went cold. He hesitated. About your history. About whether the role is the right fit given some things in your background. My history. My background. I could feel Maris's fingerprints on every word. I'm doing my job, I said. My performance reviews are strong. He nodded. Agreed. But I could see the seed she'd planted still sitting in the space between us, waiting to grow. When I left his office and reached the hallway, my legs felt uncertain. I went to my desk, sat down, breathed through it. Dane texted, "Everything okay?" I typed back, "Not yet. But I'm not breaking," because that was the calculation Maris had made. Apply enough pressure and Kira will fold. Kira will perform at the gala just to make it stop. Kira will do what she always does. She'd miscalculated. I opened a new document on my laptop, started writing down dates. Bianca showed up at my door late on a Thursday. Eyes red, hair still perfect despite it. She'd cried and then fixed it because she'd learned she always had to be presentable. She stepped inside and stood in my hallway like she wasn't sure she was allowed to sit. She called my board contact, Bianca whispered. She told him I needed to keep you under control because you were fragile. She said fragile like the word tasted wrong in her mouth. Why does she care what I do? I asked. Bianca swallowed. Because you know things, you've seen things, you don't realize how much. My stomach twisted. Bianca's voice went smaller. Please, just do the gala. She's getting more intense the more you resist. I looked at my cousin. Really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't see the favored niece standing on the other side of Maris's praise. I saw someone else trapped inside the same system, just with a more comfortable cage. Maris had been playing us against each other. Bianca the success, Kira the cautionary tale. Neither of us free, just positioned at different distances from her control. Maris invited me to her house to talk like women. Her office smelled like expensive candles and careful control. She sat behind her desk, like someone used to being on the powerful side of furniture. Then she opened a drawer and placed a thick folder on the desk between us. My name was written on the tab. My lungs forgot what they were supposed to do. "I've kept everything," she said, her voice pleasant, informative, like she was giving me useful news. "School records, therapy receipts, notes from your more difficult years, everything I used to protect you." She tapped the folder with 2 fingers. "I protected you, Kira," I whispered. "You collected me." Her eyes flashed, brief, sharp. "Be careful," she said. "People believe me." Then she slid a document across the desk, a release form, allowing her to use my name, my image, my personal story, for the foundation, permanently, without further permission needed. I looked at it for a long time, then I pushed it back. "No." Her smile disappeared completely. "Then," she said, "you'll learn what it cost to bite the hand that fed you." That night I opened my laptop and started my own folder. Named it simply, Maris, Timeline. I added everything chronologically. The dinner comment with the date, the dress and the note attached the photo I'd taken. The employer call, description, date, my manager's name, the words he'd used, the gala demand, the release form, her words in the office. Dane sat on the couch watching me, not asking, just present. When I finally stopped typing, he said, "I'm proud of you." I looked up, my throat tightened unexpectedly, because nobody had ever said that to me in the context of protecting myself. Pride had always been given for achievement or performance or surviving something gracefully, not for simply refusing to disappear. "It doesn't feel powerful," I admitted. "It just feels like finally breathing." He nodded. Then a message came through from an unknown number. No name, just, "Stop making trouble." I looked at it for a long moment, then took a screenshot. Added it to the folder with the date and time. If Maris wanted to make everything she sent me disappear, she should have sent it through channels she could delete. A woman named Nadia sent me a direct message the following week. She'd seen my name tagged on Maris's foundation page in an older post. Asked carefully if I'd worked with the organization. I answered cautiously. Confirmed I had family connections to it. Nadia replied with 1 sentence. "She hasn't paid our company in 4 months." My hands stilled over my keyboard. Nadia sent screenshots, professional, detailed, a paper trail of polite invoices and gentle follow-up emails, and Maris's cheerful replies promising payment soon. Always next week. The most recent message from Nadia's company had gone unanswered for 6 weeks. "She posts gala photos every week," Nadia wrote, "but we're still waiting for February." I sat back. This wasn't personal cruelty dressed up as family. This was a pattern. Systematic. Practiced. Maris wasn't just controlling me as a person. She was operating a version of control that extended to vendors, contractors, anyone who came close to the structure she'd built. And she was doing it while curating a public image of generosity so polished that nobody from the outside would think to look closer. A week later, I was at Maris's house for a family obligation. Dinner. No visible way out. I excused myself midway through to use the restroom, took the long hallway, past the study. The door was open an inch. Her voice was inside. On the phone, low and comfortable. I stopped walking. "Just run it through the foundation account," she was saying. "Easy. Matter of fact. Nobody audits the details when the photos look good." A pause. She laughed softly. "They love the galas. They love the pictures. Nobody loves the paperwork. That's why we don't make it interesting." I stood completely still in the hallway. My pulse was very loud. I backed away from the door slowly, carefully, without a sound. Returned to the dining room. Sat back down across from Bianca and watched Maris emerge from the hallway 2 minutes later, smiling, relaxed, sliding back into her seat like a person with nothing to hide. Her image was a costume. I had just seen exactly where the zipper was. And I understood something final in that moment. This wasn't going to stay private. 3 days before the gala, Maris called to rehearse my speech. She had already written it. She read it to me over the phone. First person, my voice, my story. My hardest years laid out in the order that made her look best. "This isn't what I would say," I told her. She paused. "It's what people respond to. It isn't true in the way you've written it." Her tone shifted. Not to anger. To something colder and more precise. Truth is flexible, Kira. Reputation isn't. I've spent 20 years building mine. You've spent 20 years being protected by it. Don't confuse the two. She hung up. I sat on my couch holding my phone with the script open on my screen. Every line was designed to make the audience feel moved, to make them feel that Maris had saved something valuable from ruin. It was a cage made of sentences. Dane sat beside me and read it over my shoulder without speaking. Then he said, "You don't have to do this." "If I don't show up," I said, "she'll contact my job again. Maybe reach further." Saying it out loud made me realize how completely she'd wrapped herself around my life. I needed a different kind of plan. The relatives started calling, one after another, spread across 2 days like a coordinated campaign. "Why are you making this so difficult? Maris has done everything for you. Don't embarrass Bianca over something small." I tried to explain carefully, kept my voice measured, used specific examples. They responded with the same phrase, rotating slightly, but always landing in the same place. "That just doesn't sound like Maris." No, it didn't sound like the Maris they saw at dinners and galas and charity photos. It sounded exactly like the Maris I'd been living with since I was 16. After the 4th call, I stopped explaining, because I understood what was happening. They weren't calling to hear me. They were calling to deliver a message. Get in line, perform your role. Stop making the image complicated. When I hung up the last call, my hands were shaking. Then Bianca texted, "She's making me choose sides." My chest tightened. Maris was pulling the net tighter, closing off escape routes, making sure that when the gala arrived, both of us were exactly where she needed us. Visible, controlled, smiling. Bianca texted me asking to meet somewhere quiet. A small cafe 3 blocks from her office. Corner table. Sunglasses on when she arrived, which made me understand immediately that she'd been crying and had no intention of looking like it. She took them off herself. Her eyes were exhausted. "She didn't just help me build my career," Bianca said, voice low. "She placed me. She connected me to board members and investors. She introduced me to people and made them see me a specific way." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "But the early funding for my first company, some of it moved through the foundation." My stomach dropped. "Bianca, I didn't understand what it meant at the time," she said quickly. "I was 26. I was just grateful." Her voice cracked, but she never let me forget it. Every time I tried to have my own opinion, she reminded me. I reached across the table and took her hand. "She's been using both of us," I said, "just differently." Bianca's eyes filled. "If she goes down, she'll drag me into it." I heard the fear in her voice, real, deep, earned, and my anger hardened into something much steadier. Resolve. I met with Sela the next afternoon. Sela worked in nonprofit compliance. She'd been my friend since college, the kind of person who saw systems clearly and didn't flinch from naming them. I showed her everything, the vendor screenshots from Nadia, what I'd overheard in Maris's study, the documentation I'd been building. Sela read through it without speaking. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before. "Kira," she said carefully. "This is audit territory," I nodded. "If I report her, the whole family will turn on me completely." Sela was quiet for a moment. "And if you don't, she keeps hurting people. She keeps using vendors she doesn't pay and donors she misleads. She keeps shrinking you to fit whatever her current story needs." Shrinking. The word hit me somewhere specific and true, because that was exactly what I'd been doing. Shrinking, adjusting, making myself smaller so there was less of me for her to damage. Sela gave me a clear plan. Document everything. Don't confront her directly. Protect my job. Be ready for escalation. I left feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Less alone. Maris invited me to lunch 4 days before the gala. Nice restaurant, public setting, her preferred arena. She waited until after the food arrived. Then she slid a check across the white tablecloth like she was tipping me for a service I hadn't yet performed. "For your troubles," she said sweetly. "You'll speak at the gala. We'll all move forward. Clean slate." I looked at the check. Then I pushed it back across the table. "I'm not for sale." Her eyes narrowed. She composed her face immediately when the waiter appeared. Warm smile, easy posture. When we were alone again, she leaned forward. "You're forgetting your position," she said quietly. People adore me, Kira. What they feel for you is tolerance. Don't mistake the two. I looked at her face and understood something I hadn't seen clearly before. She genuinely believed that love was something you accumulated through other people's approval, like votes, like a count. She believed she was winning that count, and I was losing it. I stood up, left the check on the table, walked out of the restaurant on shaking legs. First time I'd refused her with my entire body. The threat text arrived at 11:30 that night. I was almost asleep. Picked up my phone automatically. Maris, if you continue behaving this way, I will tell your boyfriend the things you've hidden, and I will make sure your employer understands what you really are. I lay completely still in the dark for a moment. Then I took a screenshot. Dane was awake when I walked into the living room. He looked at my face and sat up immediately. I handed him my phone. He read the message. His jaw tightened slowly, the way it did when something made him very calm in a specific way. What does she think she knows? He asked. Things from my harder years. She has documentation from when I was in therapy as a teenager. Files she collected. I paused. I'm scared, I admitted. Not of her telling you. I'm scared you'll see me the way she does. Dane set the phone down, took my face in both hands. I see you, he said. Quiet. Clear. And something happened to the threat in that moment. Shame can only grow in the dark. It needs secrecy. It needs isolation. It cannot survive sunlight. I went back to sleep. She had less power than she thought. Maris posted the gala promotional material 3 days before the event. My name was in it. My photo. Special guest, Kira Vale shares her story of transformation. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I sent a formal email. Polite. Documented. Subject: removal of name and image from promotional material. I do not consent to this use. Please remove immediately. Her reply came within 7 minutes. Consent belongs to people who have leverage. You don't. I screenshot the exchange, added it to my folder, forwarded it to Sela. Sela texted back minutes later. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. Vendors have formally filed complaints. The timeline is in motion. I sat with that for a while. Maris thought the gala was her moment, the victory lap. The room full of donors and applause, and Kira Vale standing in a borrowed dress performing gratitude on cue. She had designed the whole evening around that image. She had no idea the image was already fracturing. She had no idea that the timeline I'd been quietly building was about to intersect with the one Sela had set in motion. She thought she was the one controlling the ending. The night before the gala, I sat on the edge of my bed in the dress she'd sent. Looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I looked like the version of me she wanted. Polished, arranged, prepared to be grateful in front of people whose donations made her feel important. My stomach turned over. Dane stood in the doorway. What are you gonna do? He asked. I thought about it for a long moment. Really thought about it. I'm going, I said. His eyes widened slightly, but not as her charity case. I wasn't planning something dramatic. I wasn't going to stand up and accuse her in front of the room or wave documents at donors. I was going to do something smaller and sharper. I was going to refuse her script. I was going to tell the truth about my own story in my own voice. And if she tried to redirect me, if she tried to steer the narrative back to the version where she was the hero and I was the evidence of her generosity, I was going to step away from the microphone. Calmly. So everyone in the room could see exactly who was controlling what. The gala glittered. Flowers and donors and laughter and champagne and Maris floating through all of it like a woman at home in her kingdom. She kissed my cheek when I arrived, murmured, "Good girl, just for me." Then she circulated, collected admiration from every table. An hour in, she tapped the microphone. The room quieted. She smiled at me from the front row. That particular smile. The one that said, "I own this moment." "I'd like to invite someone very special," she said. "Someone who reminds us why this work matters so much." I walked to the stage. The room was quiet. Watching. I took the microphone, stood straight, let the silence hold for one beat. "I'm not here to be anyone's proof," I said. A ripple moved through the crowd. Surprise. Attention shifting. "If you're here tonight to support real community work, please remember the people behind every event like this. Vendors, volunteers, staff members who deserve respect and timely payment for their work." I didn't accuse. I didn't name her. I simply placed the truth inside the room and handed the microphone back before she could reach for it. Walked off the stage. Maris's smile had gone completely still. Like glass at the exact moment before it cracks. The room buzzed. And for the first time in that space, she looked uncertain. The foundation board meeting was 2 weeks after the gala. Celia got me in as a witness attached to the vendor complaint filings. Maris arrived in a white blazer, smiling, prepared. The board chair opened with a list of financial discrepancies, late vendor payments, inflated invoices, restricted funds redirected to branding and event costs. Maris laughed, lightly, like the list was slightly absurd. Then Nadia stood up. She said 3 words. Calm. Certain. I have emails. Another vendor. I have the invoices she specifically requested be adjusted. The room changed. Maris produced tears. Actual tears. I do so much for this community. I have given everything. The board chair said one word that stopped her voice mid-sentence. Audit. Maris turned to look at me. Her eyes were sharp and cold and certain of exactly one thing. This is you, she said. You did this. I held her gaze. No, I said quietly. This is what you did when you believed nobody would ever look closely. The board voted to suspend her authority pending the full investigation. Maris stood up, still smiling, still performing, until the smile cracked and she said to the room, loud enough for everyone, I made both of you. I made everything you are. The room went silent, her image split open right there. Maris called Bianca relentlessly in the days that followed. Bianca didn't answer. She met me at the same cafe with the corner table, hands shaking this time, but not from fear of Maris, from the weight of a decision she'd already made. I'm stepping back from my board role temporarily, she said. My stomach dropped before she continued. Not because I'm guilty, because I want to be clean, publicly clean, on my own terms. She had drafted a statement herself. No PR language, no spin, just honesty about the foundation funding confusion, a commitment to transparency going forward, and a clear separation from Maris's leadership. She published it that evening. Maris showed up at Bianca's office the next morning. I heard about it from Bianca hours later. You don't own me, Bianca had told her, 4 words. Maris turned on me next, sent a final email through a new address. You were nothing before I shaped you. I read it slowly, twice. Then I forwarded it directly to my HR file as part of the harassment documentation I'd been building. My manager called me 2 hours later. We're formally blocking contact from this person, he said. I'm sorry this happened. I thanked him. Hung up. Sat quietly for a moment. Then took the deepest breath I could remember taking. Months passed. My life became quieter in the best possible way. The kind of quiet that wasn't emptiness. That was actual peace. Bianca called me one afternoon. Direct. Clear. I'm rebuilding the company under new structure. I want you leading operations. You're steady, Kira. You see what actually matters underneath everything else. I sat with those words for a long time after the call ended. The audit results went public weeks later. Maris was formally removed from the foundation. Donors issued statements. Her social circle grew quieter. Not a screaming collapse, just the slow, honest consequence of people seeing her without the filter she'd spent years maintaining. The photo she'd posted after the dinner, the one with the caption about her sweet charity case, was still technically online somewhere, but it felt like a relic from a different life. Thanksgiving came. Dane and I set our own table. Small. Warm. Just people who'd chosen each other. I raised my glass. To help that doesn't come with a leash, I said. Dane smiled, tapped his glass against mine, and in the back of my mind I heard Maris's old label one more time. Charity case. It had no weight left, just a voice from a room I didn't live in anymore. And the door to that room was closed.